My father's voice rolled across the probate courtroom before I'd even reached my chair. "Couldn't afford a lawyer," he said, plenty loud enough for the back row to hear. I just kept walking. My heels clicked against the worn tile floor as I hugged my leather folder and took the lone seat at the defense table, completely alone. My father wore that same smug expression I'd known my entire life. My mother sat beside him with her polished, practiced smile. "This will be quick," she murmured. Their attorney adjusted his silk tie and looked at me with thin, performative pity. The judge entered. Everyone stood, and I rose automatically, 20 years in the Navy living permanently in my bones. Rain tapped against the tall courtroom windows. Their attorney stood up. "Your Honor, this is a simple estate matter." Then the doors opened again. An older woman with silver hair stepped inside, carrying a sealed envelope. The judge saw her and went completely still. "Miss Holloway," he said, almost reverently. Their attorney's confidence evaporated on the spot. The woman crossed the courtroom and handed the judge the envelope. "Direct instructions from Linda Carter," she said. "To be opened only if her granddaughter appeared here without counsel." The judge broke the seal. He read one page, then another. His face changed so completely that my stomach tightened just watching him. Their attorney took the papers and went white. My father shifted in his seat. "What is it?" he snapped. The attorney stared at the final signature like it had risen from the grave. "This can't be," he whispered. That was the exact moment my family finally understood. My grandmother had never actually left them in control of anything. 3 weeks earlier, I'd stood beside my grandmother's grave while my parents discussed her property like she was already a footnote in their planning. I'd come straight from base in my Navy dress whites. My father barely glanced at me. "Still doing all that Navy stuff?" he asked. My parents spent the entire afternoon talking about taxes, the old farmhouse, and how quickly they could sell the 12 acres that had held my grandmother's entire life. "You're never here," my mother said when I tried to object. I'd heard that line for years. Never there for birthdays, never there for Christmas, never there whenever they needed a convenient daughter to blame. But I was the one who called my grandmother every single Sunday, the one who paid to replace her water heater, the one she actually trusted. That night, in a motel room that smelled like old carpet and rain, I opened her final letter to me. Her handwriting shook on the page. "You were never hard to love, Emily. Do not let anyone rewrite your life." I cried harder than I had in years. The next morning, my father called to say the probate hearing had complications and that I should probably get a lawyer. But my grandmother had never once been sloppy with her paperwork, so I drove straight to the farmhouse and found my parents already there with a realtor. Boxes of her belongings sat out on the porch. Inside, one picture frame in the hallway looked slightly crooked. Behind it was an envelope taped to the wall. "For Emily, if necessary," it read. Inside was a business card for a woman named Margaret and one more note: "Trust nobody else." I called Margaret the next morning. She picked up on the first ring. "Your grandmother saved my career," she told me. "She worried your parents would try to pressure the estate." She told me to come to the hearing alone and to bring no attorney of my own. That morning, standing in front of the courtroom mirror, buttoning my uniform, I told myself I wasn't a frightened girl anymore. When their attorney tried arguing that my grandmother had grown confused near the end of her life, I simply looked up and waited. Then Margaret walked in, wearing a dark coat, carrying a briefcase. The entire room changed again. She presented her file: medical evaluations, notarized transfers, bank records, and my grandmother's own handwritten notes documenting exactly how my parents had pressured her to change her will. Their attorney flipped to the last page and froze. It was Margaret's signature, confirming every single instruction. The judge ruled in my favor within minutes. The farmhouse and the land were mine, along with all the savings my grandmother had quietly set aside. The court also agreed to investigate my parents' attempts to manipulate her. My mother started crying. My father looked at me like I'd somehow cheated him out of something. I felt no triumph in that moment, only grief. Afterward, I drove back to the farmhouse alone. I made my grandmother's terrible coffee and sat in her chair while Dawn slowly filled the kitchen. For the first time, I understood what she had actually left me. Not property, permission. A year later, the porch was freshly painted. Roses climbed the fence, and the farm had become a real home again. I used part of the inheritance to start a scholarship fund for local kids in the area. My brother started showing up more often. My mother eventually admitted she'd been afraid of my father for years. Even my father showed up to the memorial gathering and told me he'd been wrong. I didn't forgive everything. I didn't need to. I planted new flowers beside my grandmother's old oak tree, sat on the porch at sunset, and felt peace finally settle into a place where bitterness used to live. My grandmother had rescued me from a family that mistook loyalty for silence.